I tried really hard to include like a whole plot line about Pokemon, but it turned out I didn't have enough time for the talk. So there's a tiny little slide at the end for Pokemon, and it's mostly focused on roast chicken. But it's still going to be fun, I promise. Yeah, Pokemon. Okay, Pokemon fans here. Last week I was actually at React Connection, which I think a few of us here were at. Mo was there. And there were some really creative icebreakers. So I was thinking really long what I could do as a creative icebreaker. And it finally came to me. I think I'll just get everyone to stand up and then just boo me as hard as possible. And I think that will get the energy up in the room. So like, why doesn't everyone stand up right now? And let me just rephrase. It's not often you get to boo someone really loud. So like really take this opportunity and just boo as loud as you can. If there's anything small to throw, just like throw stuff at me. I don't mind. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1, boo. Boo. Wow. Wow, that feels terrible. Okay. Okay, sit down now. Um okay, and then like last part of the icebreaker, why doesn't everyone just cheer really loud as well? Let's get it. Let's get the energy back up. Cheer as loud as you can. Let's go. Okay. Okay, I feel better now. Thank you. All right. So, first little slide. Who am I? Why should you care about me? I don't think there's any big reason to care about me, but few things about me. I really like martial arts. There's me kicking my friend Simon, who's standing over there, and I like climbing. Although I'm really bad at it, so I kind of quit. But there's that. I am a big fan of analog photography, and also have like a quirky, funny sense of fashion. I guess that's yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And another thing about me is that I really like creative programming. So here's a few things that I did in the past. There's like a little web of nodes, I guess, that bounce around the screen. There's some like a noise function. It looks really crazy, pretty cool. I wish I had an NFT of that. Um, this is something that I made completely by accident, but like all good art, it kind of just came out well. And now I claim that I did it intentionally. And here's another thing. But yeah, the point is, I quite like creative programming and creative stuff in general that's fused with tech. And so naturally, I had a look at some of the 3JS stuff and I immediately fell in love. I thought it was really, really cool. And just before starting the talk, I wanted to share a few examples on the 3JS website. If my browser will cooperate with me. Oh, okay, it's not going to cooperate with me, but take my word for it, it's really cool. Uh, and my first 3D project ever, after being absolutely wowed by all this beautiful 3JS stuff, is based on a concept called a time box. Who here is familiar with what a time box is? Could you raise your hands? We got 1, 2, 3. Okay, quite a few of you. Well, it's a concept from Agile that's very familiar to the Theodo people here. And the idea is when you're facing a task that's you don't know the best approach to in terms of solving technically. You do like a fixed time investigation to uncover the best technical strategy, hence it's called a time box. And then you can use a formula to estimate how the complexity of that task, which we need to do in story points to plan our work and mitigate any risk. So I went ahead and made this beautiful website up on screen called TheoBox. And I would show you an interactive demo of how that box is nice and floating and rotating. But you know what? Let me try and stop sharing and see if that will help. Oh, okay, it didn't help. Let's continue. But if you come find me after, I'll show you that on my phone because it is mobile responsive as well. I promise it's really cool. If you ever need to estimate any time boxes, this is the website I would use. Yeah, and it's safe to say Theobox got mixed reviews. I had my doubts because I wanted a really discreet Slack message to share with my colleagues on the public Slack channel. So I just added a few emojis. It doesn't look like spam or scam at all. And this was the response that I got. Dan said, "Someone jail this man." Mo sitting over there said, "How long was the time box to make this time box calculator?" It was very long. And someone who has a lot of influence at Theodore John said, "Where do we post the bug reports?" There were many unaddressed bug reports, but I can assure you now it's working very smoothly. So yeah, after my name was besmirched at Theodo, I was devastated, but I didn't give up. I sat down for hours and hours, and as an entrepreneur, I thought, what kind of app will really help people all around the world? And after a lot of contemplation, I finally cracked it. That's right, Chickmazon, introducing Chickmazon. Who here likes Sunday roast? Okay, a lot of you like Sunday roast. Has anyone done any online shopping for a Sunday roast? Okay, that's a lot of hands. Most of you. Okay, and since we have established now that everyone unanimously loves like roast chicken and has a lot of difficulty shopping for roast chicken, allow me to introduce Chickmazon. Yeah, I won't be introducing it quite yet, but thank you. Yeah, that's thanks. I think it does deserve that. Yeah, I was really inspired by our gracious hosts and their e-commerce platform, and I thought the next thing that they need is roast chicken. That's the natural extension, the evolution. That's right. And I knew I had to do something similar. But even though I was excited, I was immediately faced with the big question before I started: can it even be done in React Native? And some of you are laughing because on screen, I'm a big fan of his. That's William Candiani. He does videos, a series called "Can It Be Done in React Native?" So I would urge all of you to go watch his videos afterwards. But that's besides the point. The answer was yes. It is possible to do 3D in React Native through something called 3JS, which is normally for the web, but there is a way to do it in mobile with React Native, which I'll be going through today. And 3JS is a super popular library now. It's been around for I think literally decades. It's got a bunch of stars and forks. It's used by a ton of people. It's really loved by the community, but there are big problems with it, which we'll learn about today. On screen is like a big chunky bit of code, and all of that is literally just to render a tiny little cube on the screen that's rotating, which is quite a lot if you think about it. As React devs, we're used to putting like maybe a div, sorry, not a div, a view, sorry, big mistake there, a view and a couple other things on screen, and then we're used to seeing something on screen. So we don't want to write a bunch of imperative logic to get, just a rotating cube. And eventually I found something better. I found something called React 3 Fiber. Great transition there. Thanks, Michael. So I'm now going to demonstrate a funny and original joke that's used in every tech meetups. I know you're all developers and you hate to code, but it's time to get technical. Okay, guys, so strap in. Yeah, we touched a lot on how much better React 3 Fiber is than 3JS, but I thought I would prove it to you by going through a basic render, like similar to that cube you saw. We're just going to do a simple rotating cube, and hopefully that will prove to you how much simpler React 3 Fiber is than 3JS. But first, we need a common vocabulary in terms of these 3D rendering libraries and their principles. So before we create these beautiful 3D renders, I have a little exercise for you, because I like to think of code for 3D just like a movie set, just like real life. So if you don't mind playing along, if you imagine yourself as like a famous director of a film, maybe some kind of Scorsese, some kind of Tarantino, what would you envision as the things that you need that's necessary to get something from film to premiere, some movie release? Can you think of things that are necessary to get a film ready for editing? Just shout them out. Lighting, yes. Camera, lighting, camera. Scene, the scenery, yeah, like kind of the set. Okay. Stage, yes. Yes. Amazing. Coffee boy. Well, I guess that might be the subject of a scene, which is like, you need a subject, right? It might be a movie about a coffee boy. Um, yeah, you kind of touched on all of that there, so big kudos to you. I thought maybe you get stuck on a lot of that, but yeah, someone said camera. You definitely need a camera. film camera, whatever, and I looked up some GIFs of floating 3D objects. I didn't actually create those, but those are really cool in 3D. You need a scene. Someone says scene. You need a lighting, and you need a subject. And a slightly more complex thing is you need a renderer, or like to roll the film, I guess, in this analogy, in order to actually get something. So these are the concepts that the libraries use in order to sort of link our real life brain with the code in terms of principles for 3D. We're going to dive a little bit deeper and actually look at some code. So first thing, the scene. In 3JS and React 3 Fiber, actually, the scene represents the background environment that we see. And when you define a scene, it sort of centers the subject on your screen in terms of the size, the orientation, and the location of it, so that it's center stage, just like an actor would be. You can really focus on it. And what you see on screen is the 3JS code for a scene. Admittedly, is quite simple. You just do import 3, and then you do 3.scene. So I'm not crying about this one. I thought it's pretty simple, easy to set up. The next thing is the camera. So like I said, you can't see anything in a movie unless it's gone through a camera first, right? The same principle applies for 3JS and React 3 Fiber. And the code is okay in 3JS for camera. I think it could be simplified because there's a lot of parameters to pass in, a lot to keep track of. You can see there's a parameter for the field of view, the aspect ratio, some clipping planes, and you have to move the position around. Slightly complex, but I can live with that, I guess. And the third thing, the really complex thing, is the renderer. And this is where the film set analogy is slightly weaker, but I consider this like the engine of the 3D render code. So you can imagine on like the set of Oppenheimer, which was actually recorded with an analog film camera, fun fact, you can imagine like the physical reel of film rolling, where frame by frame, you need to capture some kind of imagery in an interactive 3D design so that you can update the image every frame and actually show something moving, right? In order to interact with it. If you want to drag the cube on screen, you want to see that cube rotate. It's the same principle. And in terms of code, this is 3JS code up on the screen. You have to do some funky stuff to set up the renderer using 3. You do 3.WebGL renderer on the top line there, and we'll get into WebGL later. You need to set the size of the scene that you're capturing. You need to call the animate function. There's a lot that you need to keep track of. And the animate function is essentially something that runs every frame where you can apply some kind of mutation to the objects in your scene. You can see I'm just applying some rotation. So I do rotation dot x plus equals something, and the same for the y value. That's just going to cause the cube to rotate in the x and y dimensions slowly over time. So that's quite a lot of code in total. If we look back at what we just covered, the scene, the camera, and the renderer, there's a big wall of code there for not very much on screen, just like a rotating cube. And this is where React 3 Fiber and how much it simplifies the code really shines. Because in React 3 Fiber, all that condenses to this. That's right. Literally one line of code, albeit there are a lot of abstractions here and default conditions. There's a default camera location, a default renderer, and some kind of default scene and background. But it lets you move a lot faster for the simple things. If you just want a simple box to represent a time box for TheoBox, for example, which is a great website, this is all you need. You just need a canvas. You need a few other things that we'll get into, but for the most part, it makes it so much simpler. And I honestly think that it doesn't abstract away any important details when you think about the 3D scene at hand. I think that it just allows developers to reason about the code a lot better and not think about these low-level implementation details and not have to worry about it. So let's go through a few more examples of 3JS versus React 3 Fiber code. The next big comparison is the subject, the actual thing that we want to show. So in 3JS, we set up some box geometry. We do 3.box geometry to set up the cube model. We give it a texture with 3-mesh basic material. Here I'm just giving it some kind of color. And then we have to set up our actual mesh, which is the 3JS jargon for the objects, where we do cube equals new 3-mesh, and we apply the geometry and the material, and we add it to our scene. That's still, in my opinion, quite a lot of code just to set that cube up. So in React 3 Fiber, of course, it simplifies down to this. Yeah, a lot cleaner. And the important thing is we're using declarative code here, a declarative paradigm of writing our 3D object. It's no longer that imperative logic that our simple React framework brains can't compute, right? We need to be coddled by our frameworks, and increasingly so until we're just writing text to ChatGPT. That's what we really want. So that's what we're getting out of this. The same thing goes for the light. I'm setting up a couple different types of light in both rendering paradigms. There's the concept of ambient light, which is basically just light, the strength of the sun, in all directions on the object, which is not reality, but it's a simplification that we use for 3D rendering. And there's point light, where it's just some point in the universe that you've created that generates light rays from that point outwards, and that's where we get the shadows and things like that from. So yeah, I have to do 3-ambient lights, I need to 3-point lights on the code, I need to set the position. I'm just reading out code here, but you can tell, you're already getting bored probably listening to me read out this code that's just like, it takes a lot of time to process purely from the volume of lines that you're writing. And it's a lot simpler to write it like this in React 3 Fiber. I'm saying a lot of the same things, but the point I really want to arrive at is that React 3 Fiber makes me happy. And on the right, you can see a huge chunk of code, everything that we just spoke about, that represents that rotating cube on the left. And this is just not a productive way to think about things. I'd much rather just sit down, write canvas, do 2 types of lights, put my box geometry that comes shipped straight from React 3 Fiber, do a standard material that's also shipped as a utility thing from React 3 Fiber, and get my cube, because I just don't want to sit there for like 6 hours writing a TheoBox website, which I definitely did not do because I'm pragmatic. But yeah. And you may be thinking at this point, 3JS and React 3 Fiber, they share a lot of the same concepts, literally some of the same variable naming and keywords. They're suspiciously similar, and your suspicions would be right, because they are literally the same thing. Actually, 3JS is a renderer. Sorry, that is definitely not right. I should say React 3 Fiber is just a renderer for 3JS. It's the exact same functionality, but it allows you to write something declarative that gets translated into imperative 3JS code, and that's literally all there is. That's literally all it is. It's a simpler and more abstracted version of the same concepts, and that's why they share the same vocabulary. It's also super lightweight. Minified, it's about 100 kilobytes, which is pretty small, although I guess some people would prefer to write it from scratch and do whatever. But I think that's pretty small. That's reasonable for a 3D rendering library. And the docs literally for React 3 Fiber say themselves, it's a React renderer for 3JS. You can build your code declaratively with reusable self-contained components that react to state. So you're literally just writing React components like you would with a view, with a text, any component that comes shipped out of the box. It's the same kind of thinking. And I think that's really the benefit of React 3 Fiber. As React devs, in order to move fast, be creative, and be productive with these projects, we don't want to think in different paradigms necessarily. We don't want to be jumping between different ways of thinking. We'd much rather stick to the laws of React per se, and just think within the same paradigm in order to speed up and be more creative with our projects. That's potentially a hot take, but that's really what I believe in. But what's going on under the hood? Oops. Oh yeah, WebGL just popped in there. Yeah, so we've established React 3 Fiber is just a layer of abstraction over 3JS. But on an even lower level, 3JS is a library, which is a layer of abstraction above something else called WebGL or OpenGL. WebGL is just the OpenGL. It's a library that sits above OpenGL even or beside it and writes APIs on top of it. But these are pretty interesting libraries. If you thought 3JS was bad, OpenGL is far worse than 3JS. It stands for Open Graphics Library. It turns out people have been infatuated with vector graphics since 1991 when OpenGL was in development. And back then, it was actually a really revolutionary library. It introduced the ability to run 2D and 3D graphics directly on the GPU, which pretty much was not available to your average dev at that time. And that means we could leverage hardware for the first time, like all the hardware, for performance and graphics on the web, directly on the web at the time. And that sort of formed the concept of hardware accelerated graphics. That's really what took it to the next level at the time. And it really took off around 2011 when WebGL was released. And WebGL just provided more robust APIs for 3D graphics specifically. And it was so great at the time, it was adopted by huge players like Google Earth. Unity used it. It was really a game changer at the time. But developers eventually realized the trade-off for complexity. You'd be getting a lot more complex code, but you would be getting a lot more control over the GPU micro interactions, which is good. But for the most part, I think they realized it was unnecessary, and thus came 3JS and its popularity. And in the same way that 3JS is to WebGL, sort of a layer of abstraction that improves developer experience. React 3 Fiber is now the same thing for 3JS. It's just a constantly evolving landscape for what we consider is the best tool for the job for developer experience and velocity. So it's quite interesting to see, and I'm also interested to see like where that goes in the future. Like what will come next after React 3 Fiber with things like AI, which Henry gave a great talk on last week in Paris. And I'd love to talk with a lot of you about that if anyone's interested afterwards. So come find me. And on the mobile side of things, we use ExpoGL as a dependency, which is just the equivalent of WebGL, but for mobile. And it's created by Expo, which we all love. And that means I can trust it. If I see Expo, I immediately trust it, and I will bet my life savings on it because it's just going to work. I'm sure of it. But yeah, now let's get into the juicy part, which is building Chickmazon. And I'll start with the basic setup. The basic setup is very similar to what we went over in the demo. In fact, there's a very helpful bit of documentation by the React 3 Fiber team, which I've put in the very bottom corner there. It's small text, but I think these slides will be available. And importantly, when using React 3 Fiber for mobile, we need to ensure we're importing from the native versions of these libraries. It's super important because if you import from the normal version, then you won't get any errors. You'll just kind of see nothing work, which I did for about 4 hours. I just sat there, wondered why there was no cube on screen, and then I realized add/native in the top line, and that will solve all your problems. And the next thing I did was just add some basic UI. You can see I took inspiration from the Amazon logo, got the iconic orange and the swoosh, which is, I think it looks pretty similar to the Amazon app, to be honest. You can see the roast chicken item listing. The review says, yeah, it's pretty good, which I see most of the time. I just added that on the same level as the canvas. And the great part is rendering the chicken. I definitely didn't build this app because the chicken was the only uncorrupted free 3D model I could find online. So don't say that anywhere. And in order to render the chicken, the first thing you have to do is pull in a use GLTF hook from React 3 Dray. React 3 Dray is just a library that provides a bunch of useful utilities. Like I could have made this chicken shiny and metallic. I could have made it transparent like a diamond. I could have done whatever I want with React 3 Dray. It is an awesome library. So use GLTF is used to basically take a GLTF file or a GLB file, which is the best sort of 3D object format for the web and for mobile, and interpret it into a renderable 3D model. So that's what I did here. You can see I'm importing from assets model chicken.glb, and then I put it into a primitive, which is something that's much like a mesh. It just represents the object that I want to render. And on the bottom, I create a stage, which is the scene that we talked about, one of the building blocks. And I put a preset called Rembrandt, but it basically just adds nice color lighting, which I enjoy. It's nothing fancy like the real Rembrandt. Yeah, and I just put that in a software update. Never mind. Put that in a model, and it works. There's a chicken on screen, which is pretty awesome. As soon as I got this done, I remember I showed some people here. I think I showed you, Dan, and we were so hyped about it. Like, there's a chicken on screen. Look how awesome that is. And the next fancy thing I did was orbit controls. So orbit controls is something that's so cool. It's from React 3 Tray. You literally just put one line called orbit controls normally in the code, and it means that you can use your mouse or your finger and just pan around, zoom in, zoom out, reposition the chicken. It's not playing. There you go. You'll see it moving now. And I could just have fun with it. And the first thing everyone does when I show them this is they try and zoom into the chicken and look inside the chicken, which I obviously have to show you. But I think that's a really cool feature that you can just zoom into the chicken, because you have to know what kind of chicken you're buying. It could be hollow inside, which you don't want. But yeah, a caveat for mobile, it's just not working. So you need to use this patched package called R3F native orbit controls, which is just like a fork of the original orbit control. So that's a bit sad. I guess it's not as robust as I wanted it to be, but it does work if you do that. You see, I take orbit controls from the use controls hook provided by that patch library, and then I also take destructure events from there, and I pass it into view as a prop, and that's the way it works according to the documentation, which is pretty cool. And the next thing I added is the gyroscope, which you of course need for your optimal Chick Mazon viewing experience. You want to be able to move your phone and sort of see the chicken from different angles based on the movement of your phone. That's really important. Personally, I would want that in my chicken e-commerce app. So what you see, the code on screen is some event listeners for. I'm using an expo gyroscope. That's going to be shown in the next slide. But I do gyroscope.add listener, and I set some local state. I've abstracted some details in terms of React state and whatnot. I'm just showing you the main code. But the concept is you add some listeners and some subscriptions to the gyroscope, and it's going to start playing now. And I have a use frame hook that I'm pulling from React 3 Fiber, which is much like the animate function, which we talked about with 3JS. Remember the rolling of the film to get something to show frame by frame. And each frame, I extract the X and Y values of the gyroscope, i.e. the tilt of the phone in each dimension, and then I add that to the rotation of the chicken model, which I get from a React reference. And you get something like this. I added a video, but you can't see it, so I'm going to show you my phone. And I actually have a live demo for you guys, and let's hope this doesn't break, because I haven't tried Expo Go with this many people before. Here's a QR code. And I'll also try and airplay it. No, I used the tunnel, so you don't need to be on the same network. Hopefully this doesn't crash. If not, you guys can pass my phone around, but please don't steal it. Is it working for anyone? It's not working. Oh, nice. Okay, Mo has it. Okay, so whoever it works for, please just pass that phone around, because it's going to work for about 3 of you. Everyone, you can take Mo's phone. He just said you can. Okay, it's on my screen. So let me try and airplay this. Now this is going to be at about 5 frames per second because AirPlay is usually just at 5 frames per second. But do you see that? Okay, nice. So I'm moving my phone around. Oh, that's decent frames per second. And as you can see, I can inspect my roast chicken in all its glory. I can almost look into it, which would be nice. And there are orbit controls, so I'm dragging. Let me put it down. I'm dragging my finger around now. I'm gonna look inside the chicken to inspect the inside. It's all looking good. This crispy skin. I'll make it really tiny in case I need to hide what I'm looking at. And there you go. That's Chickmazon. Oh, thank you. Okay, let me just try and present normally. This is really difficult. Well, I think my keynote just crashed, which isn't great. Okay, sweet. And Chickmazon got some interesting reviews. I asked for testimonials from the beta testing. And the first thing we got from Claire is still don't understand why you should want to see a chicken in 3D. And when you come across hate like this, that's just unfounded. You have to move past it and move forward. I'm sure that's what Amazon did in its prime. Daniel said, "I'm so glad I got Apple Care Plus because this app made me bite a rotisserie-sized hole in my phone." So sorry, Daniel, for the loss of your phone, but I'm glad you enjoyed the app. Daniel again said, "Say goodbye to Nando's and hello to a digital world powered by React Native." That's just positivity right there. I'm here for it, Daniel. Thank you. And the last review from Callum, he said the gyroscopic viewing has transformed the way I shop for and enjoy poultry. And yeah, I'm glad that some people understand the app. So we're approaching the end of the talk, and remember I promised Pokemon, which is the correct plural of Pokemon. Yeah, I had a whole plan suggested by my coach James at Theodo, where I would randomly assign you guys Pokemon when you came into the app, and then if you got a specific Pokemon, you would win like a prize or a conference ticket or something. But yeah, that would have been cool. I procrastinated way too long and I couldn't do that. But since you demanded Pokemon, I had no choice, and I had to deliver a quick, completely different app to Chickmazon from scratch. So here you go. Introducing Pokemazon. Does anyone know that Pokemon? Anyone can name that? Sudowoodo. Okay, you don't get a prize, but you have my respect. Um, yeah, it's the same app. Sorry. Sorry. You can see inside the Pokemon. It's kind of just darkness, which is a bit concerning for Pokemon, but there's that. Yeah, and just to round things off, and since we're at the end, the conclusion of this talk, I spent an absurdly long amount of time building and debugging a chicken e-commerce app, which is sad and definitely going on the CV, but it seemed like the perfect time after those 60 hours to ask myself, why did I do this? Why would anyone bother doing 3D in React Native? And I could say that 3D is getting way more efficient every year, and we're on the verge of entering a new generation of UX, gaming, e-commerce. But I think Bill Burr put it best. I don't agree with all his political takes, but he's pretty funny, I guess. Well, I really wanted this video to play, and I feel like it's not going to play. Oh, okay. Give me a second. You know what? You guys can just hear the audio because I'm never going to work this out. But
God knows. I was googling this. You get trashed enough on Twitter. When I did this show last night, this is how like the millennials are, right?
okay, let me find the right part.
I was wondering the exact same thing. I go on Twitter and somebody wrote. Yeah, I wrote back. I can't say what I wrote back. I wrote back.
This is a very professional talk. Just give me a second.
When you're there. Line. Not in your face. Sassy.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Listen.
Walk on stage. Someone would have said that. I would have had to fight my way out of it.
It's coming.
This person's just everything's like so covert now. I feel bad because, by the way, you're ripped. Huh? You know.
Okay. Okay, it's coming. Okay.
It's fun.
Okay, that was the bit. I'm sure that. You know, I was. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was talking with Dan about whether I should do this bit because I'm not sure people will understand. It turns out it's the technical difficulties that ruined it, but I was pretty sure no one would laugh, and no one did laugh. So that's nice, I guess. That's a great way to end things. It was supposed to be inspiring, but oh my god. Thank you. Yeah, that's me. Thanks. Yeah, that's my LinkedIn. I have a very little influence. I check my Twitter and I actually have 0 followers, which I don't even know how that's possible. I thought you had to follow yourself by default, but yeah, please follow me on LinkedIn. If you want to chat about any of this, just catch me afterwards. I'm very happy to chat. Thank you.